Yashodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Canto 4, Chapter 8, Text 45. Prasadhabhimukam shasvat Prasanna vadane kshanam Sunasam subhruvam charu Kapolam surasundharam Prasadhabhimukam shasvat Prasanna vadane kshanam Sunasam subhruvam charu Kapolam surasundharam Prasadhabhimukam shasvat Prasannavadane kshanam Sunasam subhruvam charu Kapolam surasundharam Prasadhabhimukam shasvat Prasanavadane kshanam Sunasam subhruvam charu Kapolam surasundharam Prasadhabhimukam shasvat Prasannavadane kshanam Sunasam subhruvam charu Kapolam surasundaram Prasadhabhimukam sasvat Sasannavadane kshanam Sunasam subhruvam charu Kapolam surasundaram Prasadhabhimukam shasvat Prasadhabhimukam shasvat Prasannavadane kshanam Sunasam subhruvam charu Kapolam surasundharam Prasadhabhimukam shasvat Prasannavadane kshanam Sunasam subhruvam charu Kapolam surasundara. Word for word. Prasadha abhimukam always prepared to offer causeless mercy. Shaswat, always. Prasanna, pleasing. Vadana, mouth. Ikshanam, vision. Sunasam, very nicely constructed nose. Subhruvam, very nicely decorated eyebrows. Charu, beautiful. Kapolam, forehead. Sura, the demigods. Sundharam, good looking. Translation. The form of the Lord is described herein. The Lord's face is perpetually very beautiful and pleasing in attitude to the devotees who see him. To the devotees who see him, he appears never to be displeased. He is always prepared to award benedictions to them. His eyes, his nicely decorated eyebrows, his raised nose, and his broad forehead are all very beautiful. He is more beautiful than all the demigods. Purport by His Divine Grace. This verse clearly explains how one has to meditate on the form of the Lord. Impersonal meditation is a bogus invention of modern days. In none of the Vedic literatures is impersonal meditation recommended. In the Bhagavad Gita, when meditation is recommended, the word mat paraha, which means pertaining to me, is used. Any Vishnu form pertains to Lord Krishna because Lord Krishna is the original Vishnu form. Sometimes someone tries to meditate upon the impersonal Brahman, which is described in Bhagavad Gita as avyakta, meaning unmanifested, or impersonal. But it is remarked by the Lord himself that those who are attached to the impersonal feature of the Lord suffer a very troublesome task because no one can concentrate on the impersonal feature. One has to concentrate on the form of the Lord, which is described herein connection with Dhruva Maharaj's meditation. As will be apparent from later descriptions, Dhruva Maharaj perfected this kind of meditation, and his yoga was successful. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet mukam kuroti vachalam pangulam gayate girim yakripa tamaham vande Shri Gurum dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Mishwaram Nama Om Vishuddhaya Krishna Vistaya Buddhale Śrīmate Indrajamna Swamiti Namane Namam Parupada Priyasa Jagannatha Yatrananda Murti Bhaksukena Krishna Kirtanena Samhira Rakshitaya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai. So here we're finally starting to hear from Narada Muni the process of which Dhruva Maharaj should meditate on the Lord and how he should focus on the Lord and what activities and pastimes he should focus on. And as we heard here in the purport, Prabhupada is describing how meditation should be done on the personal feature of the Lord, because to meditate on the impersonal feature of the Lord is very, very difficult. Why is it very difficult, right? We can understand it's very difficult because of what Arjuna is saying in Bhagavad Gita. He's saying, how can one concentrate the mind? How can one focus the mind or control the mind? My dear Krishna, controlling the mind is more difficult than trying to stop the wind with your hands, right? In other places it's described that controlling the mind is like trying to stop a river with your hands or trying to stop a river with a sieve, right? It'll get through one way or another, right? So to try to focus the mind on nothing is even harder. To focus the mind already on something is difficult enough, but to try to focus the mind on nothing is hard enough. It's much harder, right? If you're trying to focus the mind not to think of anything, the mind will start thinking of something, one after another, one after another, one after another. It's like those societies, bogus societies, who want to start a religion that there's no rules, right? There's no limitation. You can do whatever you want. But even that's a rule. To not follow rules is a rule, right? People think that morality is a construct of the religious people, right? Morality is something that we fear in God and we fear of hell, therefore we have to follow morality. And therefore, if they're impersonalist, morality doesn't exist, so they can do whatever they want, and they think that they're going against God's laws. But God's laws are foolproof, right? Yes. Slower. Sorry. Okay. God's laws are all foolproof. What does that to mean? God says, if you touch fire, you'll get burnt. So you think, okay, I'm not going to follow God's laws, I'm going to touch fire. You still get burnt. That's His law. The negative is also part of His law. If you do something wrong in the country, you go to jail. You're following the law. You did something wrong, you go to jail. You're following the law. Just because you did something wrong doesn't mean that you went against the government. No, you're just following another one of their law, the negative law. Right? So you cannot escape. You cannot escape God's laws, and you cannot escape the mind from focusing or thinking about something. So this impersonal idea of meditation as described in Bhagavad Gita is extremely difficult because you're simply trying to control the mind. It's like a wild horse is described, right? It's running here and there. There's no way to tame it. There's no way to control it. And it's pulling you, the senses is pulling you every which way if they're uncontrolled, right? They're pulling you every which way. And the mind is so difficult to control for that reason, and therefore to focus on nothing is much more difficult. So Krishna so mercifully gives us the system of meditation in which we focus on His name, His form, His qualities, and His pastimes. And that makes it much easier to control the mind. Much, much easier. Because we're thinking of His activities. When we get tired of thinking of His activities and the mind starts to wander, then we start singing His holy names. When that becomes difficult to focus on, then we engage in His devotional service. So there's always an alternative. And so that way we can constantly, 24 hours a day, keep our mind engaged in Krishna's service because we just switch from one to another. And when that's difficult, then you focus on to something else. You're chanting japa, you see your mind is not happening, it's not working. Okay, put your japa down, go do some devotional service, engage the mind in that way. Then when you're a little bit more focused again, hear the lecture, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class. Then when that's again good, then eat his prasadam. Right? So it's just one thing after another, you can engage the mind. And therefore it becomes a lot more easy than to sit down through the Ashtanga yoga process and try to focus the mind. And on this, Prabhupada, he brings up this Ashtanga yoga process, and he describes in a purport to Bhagavad Gita 5:29, he says, "The more one is advanced, the more one is freed from the clutches of matter. The Lord is not partial towards anyone. Everything depends on one's particular performance of duties in Krishna consciousness, which help one control the senses in every respect and conquer the influence of desire and anger. And one who stands fast in Krishna consciousness, controlling the above-mentioned passions, remains actually in the transcendental stage of Brahma Nirvana. The eightfold yoga mysticism is automatically practiced in Krishna consciousness because the ultimate purpose is served. There is a gradual process of elevation in the practice of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. But these only preface the perfection of devotional service, which alone can award the peace to human beings. It is the highest perfection of life." Right? So Prabhupada is talking about how in devotional service, the goal of meditation, the goal of Ashtanga yoga is already automatically done. The process is automatically done. And not only that, the perfection is automatically achieved by following the devotional service. Right? And in another purport to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 1.5.13, given in New Vrindavan, 13th of June 1969, he goes one by one. It's quite a long purport, so I won't read the whole thing, but I'll summarize it. The Prabhupada goes one by one through all the eightfold practices done in Ashtanga Yoga and how the devotee engages in that way. Right? So first you have yama. Yama means that you are abstaining from things that are destructive to your focus or destructive to your meditation. So in devotional service, we have all our don'ts. Right? Atyahara prayasya prajalpo niyamagraha, as Rupa Goswami describes. Right? Those things are hindrances to our devotional service, and so we avoid them. Right? And niyama, things that you should follow. Right? So yama, niyama, the same things you should follow. Rupa Goswami gives a long list of those things also. What are conducive to our devotional service, things we should do. Right? Then pranayama, focusing the breath. Right? So those things, by chanting the Lord's name and by engaging in His glories, automatically you're controlling. By singing the Lord's name is actually another form of pranayama. Even those who practice traditional Indian singing or traditional singing of ragas, the way you breathe while you're singing the raga is another form of pranayama. And so therefore, by singing, they achieve their goal of yoga. And so when we sing for the Lord, we are doing the same thing, and therefore our mind becomes controlled through pranayama. Right? Then pratyahara. Pratyahara means withdraw the senses from their objectives, from their attractions. Thank you, Mataji. Right? Pratyahara, to withdraw the senses. So we have the four regulative principles that we're withdrawing. We're withdrawing the senses from those things which they want to do that's uncontrolled and unregulated. Prabhupada says regulation is part of pratyahara as well. Right? Regulation of the activities of the senses. Right? Then dharana, to focus the mind on the Lord's pastime qualities. Then dhyana, to meditate upon those, remember those pastimes and to think about them and to ponder on them. And then once one does all those things, then comes samadhi, full observance and full absorption in the Lord's activities, form, and pastimes. So automatically by Krishna consciousness, all those 8 processes are done just in a very natural way, right? Without this strict and very difficult process of just subduing them one by one or following them without understanding the true purpose. Right? And in this connection, Prabhupada quotes the verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 19:170. He says, Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchate. Right? This is also described in Rasamrita Sindhu, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which means bhakti or devotional service means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are 2 side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. Right, so this verse is such a beautiful verse because Rupa Goswami, he describes Rishikena Rishikesha. So Rishika is another word of describing the senses. Rishikena means that person from which the senses come. So that's Krishna. Right? Ena is the possessive term. So by Krishna, those senses are given to us. And Rishikesha means the master of the senses. So those senses that we have that is given to us by the Lord should be offered to the Lord, Rishikesha. And so Rupa Goswami so perfectly describes the process that by the following and offering those senses that are given to us by the Lord for the Lord, we're able to get freedom from all material designations of I and mine, and also our senses become purified by engaging in his devotional service. So this is the perfect process, and all we have to do is follow it. Yeah? In the Nrsimha Purana, further in the Nectar of Devotion, in the Nrsimha Purana, the statement is made about meditation on the form of the Lord. It is said that meditation focusing on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has been accepted as transcendental and beyond the experience of material pain and pleasure. By such meditation, even one who is fully grossly miscreant can be delivered from sinful reactions of his life. Right? In the Vishnu Dharma Sastra, it says, there is a statement about meditation on the transcendental quality of the Lord. It is said, persons who are constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness and remember the transcendental qualities of the Lord become free from all reactions of sinful activities, and after being so cleansed, they become fit to enter into the kingdom of God. In other words, no one can enter the kingdom of God without being freed from all sinful reactions. Sinful reactions can be avoided simply by remembering the form, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord. Yeah? In the Padma Purana, there's a statement about remembering the activities of the Lord. A person who is always engaged in meditation on the sweet pastimes and wonderful activities of the Lord surely becomes freed from all material contamination. All right? And then lastly, Srila Prabhupada, he goes and he says that in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, there's the story of the Brahmana in Pratishthanapura, right? We all know this pastime of the Brahmana, right? He was so poor that he did not have the means by which to worship the deity with the opulence or the way that he wanted to. And so what did he do? He would take bath in the In the Yamuna, I think it's described, he would keep himself clean, he would sit, he would focus by the processes of yoga, Prabhupada describes, right? Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. He would focus the mind and he would enter into samadhi. And in that samadhi stage, he would start performing his puja. And in his mind, he was traveling all over India, collecting all the different holy places, the water from all of them for his puja. He would have a beautiful temple constructed, made of gold and diamonds. Then he would bring the Lord, he would sit him there, and he was doing such elaborate puja and going into such detail, of which that the ending was the one day in his meditation, he was performing his, he was cooking for the Lord, and he wanted to check if the sweet rice was actually warm enough to offer to the Lord. So he put his finger next to the sweet rice, he touched the sweet rice, and he burnt his finger. And that pain woke him up from his samadhi, and when he looked at his finger was actually burnt. So such deep was his meditation that it expressed itself in the physical world, that it was so real, right? And then it's described that Vishnu in Vaikuntha, he started laughing, seeing that, because he saw the devotee was so, bewildered by what happened. Vishnu found it funny, so he laughed, and Lakshmi Devi asked him. And so this pastime is described by Vishnu to Lakshmi Devi about a Brahmana doing Manasa Puja. It's quite a beautiful story, right? In this connection, actually, my mother, when she used to do her Manasa Puja, because sometimes we'd be traveling and we would be in a plane or in a train or in a car or something, and she would only be able to do Manasa Puja. But she would take advantage, and her Manasa Puja would sometimes, like if we're in a long flight and she knew it's 6 hours, her Manasa Puja would take 4.5 hours, 5 hours. She would just sit there and she would be moving her hands and thinking and doing. And she said that she enjoyed it because it was an opportunity to do more than she normally does. And there's nothing else to do, so why not do puja? So she would close her eyes, and for hours she would be there, dressing. I don't know what she was doing, but she would be doing puja for hours. She finished her rounds, she did her reading, and now she would do puja. So that is the objective of deity worship. We start our deity worship with all the rules and regulations, the mantras, and we need to have the paper there. We have to read the verses, make sure that we're doing it. We're doing right hand, right circle, left circle. But once that becomes natural and we don't have to think about that anymore, that's not where our progress stop. The next stage is that while we're doing all these different things and chanting the mantras, our mind is doing much more than what our hands and our physical body can do. Right? So you're putting the Lord on the throne, right? You're offering him the 16 upacharas. You can visualize and think of much more that you don't have the ability to offer in the physical world. And like that, your mind will take your puja to the next level, thinking about the pastimes and being able to visualize it in a much greater way. Because you no longer need to focus on the mantras and on the hand movements and all these different things. Right? So that is the goal. So if one can achieve that through deity worship, then that is the goal of deity worship, to understand that the Lord is a person, and therefore take your worship to an even further stage where your mind is engaged, not just your physical body. Yeah? Okay. So this is what I wanted to talk on meditation. And I thought next week on the 14th of February is Vasanta Panchami, right? And then day after day after day, there's this appearance day, disappearance day of so many of our great acharyas. And Vasanta Panchami itself is the appearance day of 4 of our acharyas, well, disappearance day of 1. So I thought I would talk about 2 of them today, and so like that we can get prepared, because we won't be able to speak about all of them on the day and on the coming days. So on Vasanta Panchami, which is next Tuesday, is the appearance day of 2 great personalities, Pundarik Vidyanidhi and Raghunandana Das Thakur. It's also the appearance day of Raghunath Das Goswami and of one more person. Anyway, there's four people. I can't remember right now. Yes? Yes, Vishnupriya, right. Thank you, Prabhu. Srimati Vishnupriya, right? So we will hear about them in the future. We'll go little by little, but these 2 people we can hear about today. So we'll start with Pundarik Vidyanidhi. A disciple of Sri Madhavendra Puri is Pundarik Vidyanidhi. He was the spiritual master of Gadadhar Pandit and the intimate friend of Swarup Damodar Goswami. Right? Pundarik Vidyanidhi has other names such as Sri Vidyanidhi, Acharya Nidhi, Bhaktya Nidhi, and Premanandi. The name Premanandi was given by Lord Chaitanya. Simply by hearing his name, said Sri Gaura, Sri Mahaprabhu, the whole world becomes purified. Pundarik Vidyanidhi ki jai. Premanandi's pure devotion causes Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to sometimes cry profusely and call out loudly, Bhap, Pundarika. Bhap means father, right? Father Pundarika, Father Pundarika. Pundarika is my father, my dearmost friend. When will I see him again? Mahaprabhu would cry as he rolled on the ground crying. Continually floating in a sea of Krishna Prem, Pundarika often showed ecstatic bodily symptoms of tears, hyperventilation, falling unconscious. Whoever recites or hears the following narration of the meeting of Pundarik Vidyanidhi and Sri Gadadhar Pandit will receive the treasure of love of God from Sri Chaitanya-Bhāgavatam. So we're ready to hear the narration? Jai, and get pure love of God. When he first arrived in Navadvip, Pundarik Vidyanidhi disguised himself as a worldly sense enjoyer. Besides Mukundadat, nobody knew that Pundarika Vidyanidhi was a pure Vaishnava. Today I will introduce you to a most exceptional Vaishnava, said Mukunda, as he took Gadadhar Pandit to meet Pundarik Vidyanidhi. They found Pundarik reclining on an opulent brass bed, covered with red satin sheets, silk pillows, and topped with 3-tiered canopy. A gem-studded pan box, stuffed with fragrant spices, betel nuts, waited within his arm reach. 2 shiny brass spittoons stood as silent sentries beside the bed. You understanding, bro? Okay, the spittoons is like a brass pot where you spit the pan after you chew it. So they stood on 2 sides of the bed, so it's easy for him to reach. Seeing the mirror stained with red from his chewing pan, Pundarik laughed heartedly. His 2 servants cooled him with peacock fans. Was this a Vaishnava or a prince wallowing in luxury, wondered Gadadhar Pandit. Doubts arose in Gadadhar's mind about Pundarik's spiritual status. Reading his mind, Mukunda decided to reveal the highly exalted transcendental identity of Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Mukunda recited Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 10:6-35. The verse translation is, always hankering to taste the blood of small children, Putana came to kill baby Krishna. However, because she offered her breast to the Supreme Lord, Putana attained the greatest blessing of being accepted as a mother of Sri Krishna. Hearing this verse totally transformed Pundarik Vidyanidhi. A Ganges river of tears flowed from his eyes. Perspiration rained from his body. His hair stood on erect. He ripped off his embroidered silk shirt and wildly thrashed his legs about. Rolling on the ground, he wailed, "The Lord is infinitely merciful, yet he deprives me of his mercy." His clothes, brass bed and fine bed sheets, mirrors, spittoons, all his opulent trappings were ripped to shreds and smashed to bits. 10 men tried but couldn't restrain the force of Pundarik's ecstasy. The manifestations of Pundarik Vidyanidhi's pure love of Krishna competed with one another for some time. Finally, his spiritual emotion reached their peak and he lost external consciousness. After witnessing this spectacular display of transcendental feelings, Gadadhar Pandit realized his offense in misjudging Pundarik Vidyanidhi and to be a materialistic devotee. To rectify his mistake, he wanted to take initiation from Pundarik Vidyanidhi. 6 hours later, Sri Pundarika returned to external consciousness. Now he seemed calm and composed, and happily he initiated Gadadhar Pandit. Sri Pundarik Vidyanidhi ki jai. Pundarik Vidyanidhi is King Vrishabhanu, Sri Radha's father in Braj Leela, right? That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would say, "Oh Father, Pundarika, where are you?" Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radharani. And what's interesting is that Gadadhar Pandit is also an expansion of Radharani. So Radharani taking initiation from Vrishabhanu Maharaj. It's quite interesting. Yeah? And his samadhi is in the 64 samadhi area of the temple of Damodar. Damodar in Vrindavan. Yeah. 64 samadhi area. So that is the end of the description of the pastime. By the blessings of Vrindavan Das Thakur, hopefully we can realize this pastime and understand it to its true value and one day attain pure love of God. Jai Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Okay, the next person we'll hear about is Sri Raghunandana Thakur. Raghunandana Thakur ki Jai. Sri Mukunda Das, Madhava Das, and Sri Narhari Sharkar were three brothers who lived in the village of Sri Khanda. Raghunandana was the son of Sri Mukunda Das. In the house of Mukunda Das, who lives in Sri Khanda, Lord Sri Gopinath is served in great devotion. One day Mukunda was called out to do some work, and then he instructed his son Raghunandana to worship the deity and asked him to serve the Gopinath that day. He explained to him that this deity is in our family for many generations, and thus he has been worshipped by my father, and his father, on and on. In this way, for many years, just as your mother feeds you every day, so he also has to be fed every day. Having explained to Raghunandana that this is a very big responsibility, and he should be very careful to give his full attention to the service of Gopinath, Mukunda went out. Raghunandana, meanwhile, having been instructed by his father, collected the items for offering to Sri Gopinathji and entered into the deity room. Raghunandana was at the time barely 5 years old, and therefore when he saw that Gopinath hadn't eaten the offering after he had imitated how his father would offer the bhoga, he became very worried. Ultimately, he simply requested Gopinath with tears in his eyes, "Please eat Gopinath." Gopinath, becoming completely subjected by Raghunandana's simple request, which was made entirely in love, he thus stealthily ate up everything without leaving any remnants. After some time, Raghunandana's father, Mukunda, returned and asked his son if he had done as he was told. When he replied yes, then Mukunda asked him to bring some prasadam so he could have lunch. Raghunandana replied, "Prasadam? I offered everything like you told me to Gopinath, and Gopinath ate everything. So what should I bring you now?" Mukunda was completely taken aback. The boy was not naughty and always accustomed to speak the truth. I doubt if he could had eaten everything. I wonder what actually happened. Musing on this matter for some time, on another day his curiosity was stirred, and once again he requested Raghunandana to offer the bhoga to Gopinath on that day. On that day, however, having gone out the house, he again came in from another door and remained hiding in one place. Raghunandana was very happy to be able to serve Gopinath again and brought everything into the deity room as before. He again very insistently persuading Gopinath to take his meal. As Gopinath had eaten half a laddu, he espied Mukunda peering out of the hiding spot and didn't try to cover up the fact that he had eaten half of what he did. But neither did he eat any more. Seeing all this, Mukunda was completely immersed in ecstatic love and picked up his son and put him on his lap. He extolled his virtues with a voice trembling with ecstasy, all the while torrents of tears of joy falling from his eyes. Even today, those who are greatly fortunate can see that half-eaten laddu in Gopinath's lotus hand. Thus, Sri Uddhav Das sings the glories of Raghunandana, who is non-different from Madana, Cupid. Sri Raghunandana Das Thakur ki Jai. So the different people describe this pastime slightly different ways, but the basic thing is that he offered this bhoga to Gopinath, and Gopinath ate everything. And so when Mukunda Das came back and saw that there was no prasadam, he was wondering what happened. And so some people say it was a few days later, some people say it was immediately. Mukunda went and found the laddu and said, "Here, Raghunandana, go offer this also." So he went with the laddu to offer to Gopinath, and Gopinath only ate half. And then he was still full from eating lunch, so he didn't eat the rest of the laddu, he only ate half. So some people say that he stopped eating because Mukunda was watching. Some people say it was because Gopinath was full, but both stories are the same. Yeah? Raghunandana was also present in the Keturi Utsav, means the Narottam Das Thakur's Gorpanim festival in Keturi. In Krishna Lila, he was Kandarpa Manjari, and in Dwarka Lila, he is Krishna's son, Kandarpa. Raghunandana's son is Kanai Thakur, and his descendants are still living in Sri Khanda. Yeah? Many years later, One time in Jagannath Puri, many years later, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Mukunda Sharkar, the father of Raghunandana. He said, "Are you the father of Raghunandana, or is Raghunandana the father of you? Can you please answer this question for me?" Mukunda Sharkar replied, "Raghunandana is my father, because he is the one who is giving me Krishna Bhakti. Therefore, he is my father." Lord Chaitanya was very, very pleased by this answer, and he said, "Yes, one who enlightens you in Krishna Bhakti is your spiritual master and your spiritual father." Sri Mukunda Das Ki. Although Mukunda Sharkar was a great devotee, he was so inspired by Raghunandana's devotion that he actually considered his son his father. That is the nature and gratitude and humility of a true Vaishnava, and how much that made Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's heart so pleased. Sri Raghunandana Das Thakur Ki, Mukunda Das Thakur Ki, Sri Vasanta Panchami Ki, coming soon. Vasanta Panchami is the beginning of spring, right? And it's also when Krishna does his Vasanta Rasa Das pastimes. In India, it's very common that on that day we dress the deities in yellow with many, many yellow flowers. At that time also, the mustard seeds are flowering. So like whole India looks yellow, like especially in Bengal, you're driving, it's just yellow, 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 everything's yellow. And everyone also dresses in yellow on that day. So it's a very wonderful, wonderful day. In Mayapur, you'll see sometimes they make the gopis also yellow. They put yellow turmeric color all over them. And so they look yellow, and their dress is yellow, and there's yellow flowers everywhere. So it's the first day of spring. Jai. They do Pushpa Abhishek, but it's not because it's Pushpa Abhishek. Pushpa Abhishek was some time ago, was on Brahmotsava of, it's Sri Krishna Pushpa Abhishek. But they throw flowers also on the deities on that day. But it's just part of the festival. It's not specific pastime. Jai. So are there any questions or comments? Yes, bro.
Thank you for the nice lecture. I had one question on the part of the meditation at the beginning. I hear very much a lot in different occasions, different parts of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam about the importance of the meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord. I still have an idea of what it means, the lotus feet in particular, but they are mentioned so many times, and I would like if you can elaborate more on what the significance, esoteric or not, or like, yeah.
So there's many different descriptions, like you said, of the lotus feet, the different ways to meditate on the lotus feet. Both that you're just focusing on the Lord's lotus feet as his lotus feet, how beautiful they are, the smell of tulsi leaves as described, the smell of the chandana, the different fragrances they put on them, the color of his toenails, the different markings on his lotus feet, right? But there's also described as his lotus feet being part of the 9 processes, right? Padasevanam, remembrance, right? And it's more in the mood of dasya ras, right? So therefore, actually, thank you for mentioning this, but in that same purport of Srila Prabhupada, he describes how Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is also the form of the Lord, and how the first cantos, you're starting from the lotus feet, you're going to his thighs, his belly, his chest, his arms, his face, then his mouth and his eyes, and like that, that's the 10th canto, his activities. And then, so one shouldn't, when Prabhupada's talking about meditation, he says one should take the gradual process and first meditate on the beginning, the initial stages. And so another description is given that part of meditating on the lotus feet is understanding our relationship with the Lord, right? Our sambandha. What is our relationship? How can we serve him? What is our identity, not being this body, being the eternal servant of the Lord? And so therefore that is the beginning, right? And that's why Madan Mohan is Sambandha Adideva. And Madan Mohan's lotus feet are non-different from Krishna, right? Yeah. Madan Mohan, but it's described that when Bajranab made those 3 deities and Uttara came to inspect them, she described how Madan Mohan's feet are non-different from Krishna's lotus feet. They look exactly the same. Then she described how Govinda's chest, his middle section, is non-different from Krishna. They look exactly the same. And Gopinath's face looks exactly the same. And so that's why we have Sambandha, lotus feet, Abhideya, serving, and Prayojana, the face. So that's why you have Madan Mohan, Sambandha Adideva, Govinda is Abhideya Adideva, and Gopinath is Prayojana Adideva. So they're the lord of those three different processes. So if you read Nectar of Instruction, I think? You read Nectar of Instruction? I think there Prabhupada also describes about the importance of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, and how one can start the process of Sambandha by understanding one's identity, the importance of devotional service, the glories of the holy name, the glories of chanting, basically all the do's and don'ts of sadhana bhakti, and then that's how one can begin the process. And then as one goes up the path, the form of the Lord and the understanding and the process, then one starts to relish more and more and more and understand. Does that help, Prabhu? Prabhu, any comment, question?
I'm just always thinking, I actually have somewhere the different aspects of the Lord's lotus feet and what you see on the soul, flag, elephant, carrier for, some different thing, policy, and that's a very, it's a very elevated topic in one sense, and in the other hand, it helps also, so, it helps to meditate, but then sometimes the explanations giving for the different symbols, they are a little bit kind of, so it doesn't say so much to me sometimes. I mean, I should have maybe some examples, but just now because
I understand
Brian
what you
asked about this. Do you have any thoughts about the marks on the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna actually?
Yeah, I never went deep into that subject. I barely know all the marks. Like, I don't remember every one and the difference between the two. But on that one point, Prabhu, that you said that it doesn't affect me personally, like it doesn't like catch my attention or my interest as much. One description is given that unless we get to the stage where we can purify ourselves enough that we start any description of the Lord becomes just as joyful, just as beautiful, just as like here. Pundarik Vidyanidhi didn't go into ecstasy because he was describing the rasa dance. He went into ecstasy describing Putana, right? So it wasn't that, some very esoteric, very deep rasa. No, it's Putana, right? And he went into full ecstasy just thinking of that. So until we get a little bit more progress and a little bit more advanced, then sometimes the different descriptions of the Lord or different pastimes may not, for us, gel, or how do you say, like inspire us as much or make us so interested. But nevertheless, it's beneficial to read about it, to understand, to glorify, and then hopefully one day we will be anything and everything he does will be immensely amazing. Like the pastime of Narada Muni and the cobbler, right? So he was supremely happy hearing that the Lord was putting an elephant through the eye of a needle, and he was, dancing in joy and chanting the Lord's name just from hearing that. So I think we just need some purification, Prabhu, until we can relish everything and anything about the Lord. But in Nectar Devotion, there's described all the impetuses for ecstatic love, and there's a section on his lotus feet, there's a section on many different features. And so from there we can take Prabhupada's purports on it and hopefully develop some desire. In Nectar Devotion.
The lotus feet. So when we are, for example, in Cologne, we have a big hall for Sundays, and shotas, they are on the altar, Gaura Nitai. And every Sunday we transfer the small deities, so to say the shotas, to the hall. And first we take the feet. Yes.
The shoes or the feet itself?
I mean
the shoes.
The
Oh yeah,
shoes,
the feet,
like
the imprints.
like feet.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Okay, Srila Prabhupada, the same thing.
Yeah.
How can you explain it?
So that's
Connected with what we're speaking now about.
well, the lotus feet or the shoes in that way in deity worship is one of the first things you do when we move the Lord. There's 5 main upacharas that are used, right? Ime paduke idamasanam swagatam paryam argyamachmaniyam, and then esha pushpanjali. So when you move the Lord, you say, my dear Lord, please come here. You move his shoes, like if he's going there, then you take him, right? So that's the reason we do it. It's just part of deity worship. It's considered the proper way to move, right? And then you can expand that more. Then there's many other things you can do. But that's the basic that you should do when you're moving the Lord from one place to another. Even within puja, when you're not physically moving him, you do that. You say those mantras.
That means he can go.
He can move. He's moving. He's there.
Moving, that's about the feet.
Yes.
Not hands, not.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the lecture. One question. You mentioned in the beginning regarding personal and impersonal features of God. Can you give more examples on impersonal features and why you shouldn't meditate on that?
It's not that you shouldn't. Krishna describes that is not recommended and is very difficult because it's difficult, right? Understand? It's very difficult because the Lord's energy or the Lord's light or Brahman, for that example, it's nothingness, right? It's just his effulgence. And so to meditate or to focus on nothing, it's very difficult, and it's kind of dry, right? There's no relish, there's nothing, it's just ending, right? And so that's why Krishna describes it as being very difficult. And for us as devotees, we understand, and we do not look for that feature because we are not interested in the light or the Brahman feature of the Lord. We're interested in him as a person. So we want to pass through that Brahman and go to him as a person, not simply enjoy the effulgence or the light, the merging with him. But the analogy is given in the Vedas, right? It's given that basically the Mayavadis are so disgusted. Mayavadis, you understand Mayavadi? Okay. Mayavadis, they're so disgusted with this material world and samsara and the suffering of samsara that ending the cycle of samsara is all they focus on, right? It's kind of the analogy is given that if one has a knife in your body, you're not thinking about lunch, you're not thinking about breakfast, you're not thinking about a hotel. All you're thinking about is get the knife out. That's all you can think about. And once you take it out, right? So that can last many, many millions and billions of years. Taking the knife of samsara out and going into Brahman is such an immense happiness because you're ending that suffering of samsara. But at some point, the jiva is going to start thinking, I need to go to the doctor, right? What's next? I want something else. So at some point, the jiva will start desiring again. And when that jiva desires something again, he cannot go further because he has not established a relationship with God. So he has nowhere to go above, so he has to come back down. And so therefore, even though it's described as eternal, it's relative eternal. And relative eternality means it's eternal for us because it can be many, many billions of Brahmas and, whole lives. It can be, we can't even conceive the amount of time, but at some point the jiva is going to desire something because it is the nature of the jiva to desire. Understand? So for us, we're not interested in Brahman, not for all the negative reasons that I just said, not just because, it's temporary. That's not why. We are interested in Krishna. And so therefore, Brahman realization or liberation in that way has no attraction to us because we want to know him as a person. We want to go serve him as a person. And therefore, it's just one of the things you need to go through. So Brahman realization for us is for that reason not interested. But for the yogis, it's still glorified everywhere in the Vedas, right? It's glorified. Liberation is glorified. And it's one of the 3 liberations, right? Sayujya, Salokya, and Sarupya. Sayujya means the merging with the Lord, Brahman. Salokya means to reside in his same loka, and Sarupya is to attain the same form as the Lord. So Sarupya is Vaikuntha, Sayujya is Brahman, and Salokya is Goloka Vrindavan, or Vaikuntha planets. Yeah? Any other questions or comments? No? So we'll finish there. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Pundarik Vidyanidhi ki, Shri Raghunandana Das Thakur ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Jai.